Good day, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the CEO Mastermind.ai podcast. Today, it's going to be incredible. I met Connor about 6-7 months ago. We both have the same high school alma mater. At the time, he was already a little bit of an enigma. He was the youngest person to do an Ironman on 6 continents. And then he decided to have this idea that we'll talk about today, chasing Antarctica, in which he is now not only the youngest, but the only person to have run a triathlon on all 7 continents. Now, as you all know, here on the CEO Mastermind brand, we talk about strategy, structure, and people. And what we'll talk about today is the parallel between business and pro and what it takes to win. And also the mindset. So for those of you who don't know, I'll put in the show links. You can follow Connor on Instagram and any other, we'll put that in the show notes. But it's really about the mindset. And I think, I'm going to bet, Connor, you'll probably talk about that today to kind of talk to us about what it was like at the Drake Passage. Like you've gone to a place in the world that maybe several thousand people have ever gone to in the last 100 years. So it is a pretty special place. It is an unbelievable accomplishment. And so huge congratulations. So let's get right into it. Welcome.
There's no cell phones, there's no internet.
I'm going to take it easy. I'm not going to push myself.
I don't believe they can do it.
Thank you. So good to be here. Appreciate you having me, and fresh off the boat from Antarctica, so still thawing, so thoughts are fresh, and look forward to jumping in it.
For sure. So before we get into the whole chasing Antarctica, can you give a little bit of background, the triathlon, how did you get into that? Your training regime, like what's it take to run a triathlon, let alone 6 in a short period of time on 6 different continents?
Yeah, for sure. So, I grew up with 2 older brothers, always competitive. I always had that mindset to compete and be as good as them. They are 3 years older, and I would try and play, 3 years higher in hockey from like a very young age, and just always loved to compete. But Ironman's kind of a funny story. And for people maybe listening, they're not 100% sure what an Ironman is. It's a 3.8 kilometer swim, 180 kilometer bike ride, and 42 kilometer run. And it's widely considered the single hardest sporting event on the planet. So a friend of mine actually just did one time. And I was like, that's impossible. How could you, possibly do this human feat? And it just triggered something within me to give it a try. So I stumbled across triathlon fully in university, but not really until 2020, where I quit my job, moved halfway around the world, and moved to New Zealand to do my first Ironman.
So that's great. And I draw parallels with that because most people, whether they're starting a business or running a business or want to get promoted, you almost always start with that self-doubt where you question it. Oh, I can't do it. It can't be done. Or they're special. And there's no question you're special. You have some genetics in great shape, but it requires a ton of work to get there. So how long do you typically prepare for a Ironman?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, from what I read, it was you have to give yourself at least 6 months of, structured, diligent training. So for me, I knew the best way for me to actually go all in and accomplish this goal was you're really a product of your environment. And to me, I needed to go into a new environment. And so, like I said, I left my job in Canada and moved to New Zealand 6 months prior to the race and joined a local triathlon club, and just had to surround myself with people that were doing what I wanted to do in order to live it and see it through. And 6 months of hardcore training, balancing about 20 hours of training on top of your work week. It's a huge sacrifice, but super rewarding when you cross that finish line.
It's interesting you say that because I've heard multiple successful people in both sports and business talk about their environment. And that's why a lot of people join communities, they join masterminds, they go to seminars. And, most people go to those sorts of things. They tend to get a short-term charge. They get excited, they go to the Tony Robbins event, and then they fizzle off. And I think the key word that you said in your description there is just sort of discipline. and you and I both went to St. Mike's, so teach me goodness, discipline, and knowledge. Like discipline was ingrained in us. The whole concept of discipline and consistency, to me, that's like I always say, it's the grease of performance, right? Like you have a plan, you stick to it, and no matter what, I'm sure you definitely didn't want to hop into cold water. Nobody actually wants to do that, but you had a plan to conquer something, and you have to, hey, I'm going to accomplish this, regardless of Antarctica. You're not swimming in the Gulf waters of 90 degrees. It's usually pretty cool waters, right? So I think that's a really interesting lesson as well that draws parallel, because it is about that consistency and structured plan. I would imagine like the food regime and all that would be pretty tight as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, it was all a learning curve for me. I think even before discipline, like the number one important thing is believing in yourself, like having a vision, but truly believing in yourself, because discipline and motivation always come and go. But if you don't believe in what you're doing, then you're not going to see it through. And that's where I think a lot of people fail, is they have an idea, but they don't really believe that they can do it. So for me, I saw a friend do it, and I said, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And I think, we need more people to believe in themselves and also believe in others. Like when you share your goal, make sure the people you're around are saying, I can see you doing that, and I want you to do that, and I believe in you. But yeah, I mean, food and training, it was all a learning curve for me. It was my first time. I just kind of jumped right in the deep end. And I think a big lesson in all of it was just learn by doing. You can only read so many books. You can only listen to so many masterminds and podcasts. And I think like the real growth happens in applying what you hear, trying it, and figure out the formula that works for you. So my first, Ironman in New Zealand, like nutrition was just a question mark. Like my brother, I looked up to him. I thought, he probably knows what to do. And he recommended we get 12 Build-A-Bars and eat one every hour. And if you're on the bike carrying 12 bars, that's not the way to do it.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's hard. And you take one bite and your mouth is dry. And anyways, long story short, I never had a bar after the first one, and you adapt by the failures that you have.
Pretty quickly. I'll go back quickly to what you said, because actually one of your Coffee Connor, you said it, but and I don't know who said it, but energy goes where your thoughts flow. So energy flows where your thoughts go. And so to your point, if you don't believe in yourself, even subconsciously, how can anyone else be a cheerleader for you? Like the motivation, the motive for action, motivation, if we break it down to the Latin, that you need to have a motive and you need to create that with action. So action is generated, but the motive comes from your mind, right? And so I think that's the piece that a lot of people don't really realize. And I've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs, and they don't get to that next level because they don't really believe that they can. They don't believe they can be a CEO. They want what that looks like, but they don't believe that they deserve it or that they earn it. And I think that's really interesting what you said, because it would have been way harder, maybe impossible, if you didn't believe that you could, because it just would have been too easy to give up. You would have just told yourself, it's not for me. I don't think I can do this anyway, so I'm just going to not do the second one. But instead, you believed that you could, and you did. And all, the ups and downs and sideways you've had along the last 4 years, you just get through them because you have that single-minded belief. So actually, that's a really important nugget that I think the audience should really sort of take a note on. Because there's nothing more important than the belief in oneself. It's impossible to get external energy if you don't have it yourself. You need to have it yourself, and then you need to fan those flames with those who believe in you. My dad always said, like you, I have an older brother, older sister. I played hockey, and I didn't get too high of a level because otherwise I would have been in NHL. But I've always played with older people because my dad always said, you get better by playing those better than you. And so same thing with you. It's like you surround with those that have done it and can pull you up. Like I heard this last week, nobody ahead of you or anyone who has more money or won a championship or whatever it is you want to desire those people never make fun of you. They never not support you because they're like, come on, they pull you up the hill. Whereas those who don't see where you want to go, they want to pull you down the hill so that you fit their frame of reference of what they think you're capable of. And at the end of the day, sometimes you're right. You did the most important thing by changing your environment and putting yourself in a position. So incredible learning right there.
Yeah. And I think just to amplify that is like, find rooms where you're learning and growing and not necessarily the best person in the room. And I think that's like just a good philosophy to challenge yourself all the time. Is you can be super smart and super talented and super driven, but if you're always teaching others in the room, then how are you going to grow yourself? And instead of like that ego side of it is like everything, you can learn something from everybody. And I think just to,
Absolutely.
you know, echo the point around mindset is like triathlon is swimming, biking, and running. But the biggest lesson I learned in all of it is what I call as the fourth discipline, and that's the mindset. And it was like
Yeah.
the day in, showing up, putting in the work, even when you didn't want to, doing the swims, doing the bikes, doing the runs, even when you don't want to, is where the results eventually come over a period of time.
Yeah, I think it's who did I hear said if you have a plan and you stick to the plan, don't think about the outcome, but think about the steps and focus on the steps. Like Lord knows I've gone to the gym 5 times and tried to get a six-pack after 5 times. It kind of doesn't work that way. But if I did it 5 days a week for a year straight, some people genetics will get there in 5 months, some will get there in 12 months. But it becomes undeniable whether you're successful or not. And so I think that you said it really does come with your mind to push you through. So I completely resonate with that 1,000%. So let's just switch a little bit to chasing Antarctica. You know, I'm sure you've had people say that's crazy, all these sorts of stuff. When I heard you were doing that, like for me, it gave me so much energy because there's two sets of mindsets, right? So we talked about this, and I think your level of mindset is next level. And I think something people need to learn from. First level mindset that I think we need to adopt and to drive positive change is you got to believe in yourself. Because you said this earlier, true. Has this been done before or is it possible? Yeah, lots of people have accomplished lots of things. And so that's your first step in belief. And once you do that, you can now have the proof that you have the belief and the ability to accomplish. Then you get to the next level. And that's what you did. The next level was, well, no one's ever done that before, right? And so not only has no one ever done triathlon as young as you on 6 continents, the next level was, it's like someone going to Mars. No one's ever done that before. And so this is kind of like going to Mars, but everything we have around us was done by some quote unquote crazy person. It's never been done before, so it's not possible. All of us have to look around. It was all driven by people who believed in themselves and something. And so that's what I really love about your message around driving for positive change. If you look for a win, you find a win. If you look for a loss, or if you look to take from others, you'll do that too. And so I think the power of the mind is our most powerful thing we can do it. And if the more people that get behind positive change and inspiration, the place with the world would just be that much better. So training for, can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, I love sports and I love the essence of like, what do you do to train for Antarctica? I mean, that's different than training for New Zealand. And so can you talk to us a little bit about how you prep for the climate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, I was kind of, you know, had this vision, but didn't really know where to start. And I knew cold would be a whole new challenge. So started just with cold showers. As simple as that. Was like, okay, let's implement a daily regimen of 10 seconds of cold showers at the end of every cold shower. And at first that felt hard. And then eventually I went into cold ice tubs and plunges and would do that, you know, 3-4 times a week for 2 to 6 minutes eventually. And then after I built a tolerance over, you know, the course of kind of like a year, I started doing cold swims with wetsuit in the open ocean. And then eventually we would climb, my friends and I, into the mountains in Vancouver in the winter and cut out ice lanes and jump in and go back and forth in, you know, 0 to 1 degree water temperatures to try and replicate what the cold exposure would feel like. And it was just kind of like a process of osmosis. Like each time I would be like, okay, you know, my goggles are too small and my head is the first thing that's going. So I need to get bigger goggles to cover more surface area on my face. Learning by talking to people who have done cold water swimming is you can find a gelatin, like a petroleum jelly that you put on your skin that creates another layer between the freezing water temperatures and your skin. So you avoid frostbite. And it was just this like ongoing kind of game and puzzle piece of like figuring out a little bit of each time you go of like what you want to tweak and perfect. But for the actual Antarctica swim, you know, it was -1 degree water temperatures. There was colder than I've ever experienced. And I think there's a lesson in there of like, you're never going to be fully ready to do what you want to do. And sometimes you just got to try. And for me, it was pretty scary. There was a seal chasing me. I swam, you know, almost 4 kilometers in ice water in Antarctica. We had a boat beside me, kind of going back and forth to like scare off the
Wow.
seals. And it was just this like insane feeling of adrenaline and ambition. And I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, but to realize it was a stacking game of trial and error for 2 years before it all kind of worked out.
I know you had a coach of someone who passed just before your trip. What did they coach you on? I remember when you were talking to you, someone had passed just before. Were they coaching you on running or climate control or just the swimming piece? What were they coaching you on?
Yeah, so it was a guy named Alejo, and he was the first South American to summit Mount Vincent, which is the highest mountain in Antarctica. And he is kind of like the logistics expert for any expeditions happening in Antarctica. So he was helping me with permits, and it was an early person that believed in me, which I thought was really important. And there's another gentleman named Doug Stout who has been to the North Pole and South Pole more than anybody on the planet. And he was my first call. When I was even thinking about this crazy idea, it was like, who do I even start and call? And I cold called
Right.
Doug, and I was like, hey, this is my idea. And I think, him just being like, instead of that's crazy, is like, okay, like, let me help you make it happen. Was
The right
just
people to be surrounded by. I love that.
Yeah, and I think that's why we were talking about positive mental attitude, and what I call is like PMA, and what I learned from people much more senior than me and mentors I developed over the way is like the world needs more PMA, positive mental attitude. Is like
Absolutely.
don't doubt somebody when they come to you, no matter how crazy it is, because like, and especially young people, they're so impressionable. It's like if you tell somebody, oh, that's not a great idea, or think about this, like that, you plant seeds of doubt, which just kills all creative freedom. And
Yes.
so I think that was a really, really special kind of duo of Alejo and Doug kind of believing in me right early on that it was possible.
I love that acronym PMA. And you obviously surrounded yourself with the right people, which is critical. I think that's to your point where people make the mistake. Oftentimes, particularly the younger generation, they don't necessarily seek out support because they'll, Instagram has all the answer or ChatGPT has all the answers, but the answers are within. The answers is
Yeah.
within the human experience and the authenticity of it. It's not in the tech. The tech is just an enablement of things. That's pretty cool. I love that PMA. I'm going to use that. I'm going to copyright you and cut you a quarter every time I say it. And God rest Alejo soul for helping you and being an inspiration, not just to you, but to others around the world to prove that these things are possible because they are possible, right? It happens.
Sure.
I'm going to go back to the water for a second. What
Yeah.
is up with the seals chasing? Like, what risk did they tell you about the water? And was chase like a seal trying to check you out? One of them that they identified, or is that was that an unknown that propped up?
I mean, I think it was an unknown, like it was a known unknown, like you knew there's seals and wildlife, penguins, whales, orcas, like dolphins that swim around there. But where I was actually swimming was in a little cove called Deception Island, which is actually a volcanic island in Antarctica on the peninsula. And in the particular cove that I was swimming, it was about 600-meter length, 600-meter long cove. I would do back and forths. But on the perimeter of the cove is just like elephant seals and different types of seals, which are massive, like double the size of me.
They're
And
very big, especially elephant seals.
yeah, and like, a lot of them aren't particularly aggressive creatures, unless it's a leopard seal. And it's easy to identify a leopard seal when you're there. So there was no leopard seals where I was swimming, which was great. But even still, it's like, doesn't matter if it's a seal or a penguin or whatever else swimming beside you when you're freezing cold. And it's just like, it's freaky. You can feel the presence. And so we had the boat that was going, and they're just curious, but they're coming to kind of like follow me and see, oh, what's this guy doing?
What's going on? Yeah.
And so the boat would just kind of go back and forth if they got anywhere nearby, and they would kind of like circle back. And yeah, to be honest, it was just something that I had to put my head down and try not to think about.
Try not to think about. Yeah. I think that's also true in business and life in general, right? Like when we're trying to reach our own fitness goals or business goals, like there's going to be stuff I always say life is like a roller coaster. You know, you're going to be okay. You're going to get off it. You just don't know how
Yeah.
many upside downs or what's the tumble going to be. And in that moment, you weren't necessarily upside down, but you kind of went on a bit of a steep drop because you're like, whoa, what's going on? There's something around here, but you sort of stay focused and you're fine.
Yeah.
So I think there's a testament to mental fortitude. Because with that that could have easily, I'm sure, could have been easily distracting. I'm sure for a moment you have to say, got my team back there, they've got my back. I've got to focus straight. If not, I'm going to create a problem for myself that doesn't need to be created, right?
Yeah, 100%. So actually it was about 3K into the swim and my left leg completely locked. And it was actually really scary because I was like, I had to turn my back and was like yelling to my support boat, like, what do I do? Like my leg is completely cramped and as stiff as a board. And they came over, gave me some warm water and electrolytes. And then it was like really cramping. And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And they're like, well, you can go to the cove beside us, which was like just the perimeter. And it was like 50 meters away. And so I look up and there's like 6 or 8 sea lions just looking at me. And I was like, there's no way I'm going that way. And so just flipped over and started swimming with no legs. And yeah, I think there's just moments where you just have to adapt and endure. And, you know, there's going to be tough moments no matter what you're pursuing in life. And you just have to like make a decision and stick to it and see it through. And to me, it was like, okay, like, I don't have an option. I have to finish this. And if that means swimming with no legs, then I'm going to do that.
Yeah, because you have that belief and you have that goal, right? So always going back to that strategy and that plan, if you will, to go back to traditional business speak. Before going into water, and we talk about the running and the cycling, you had to get there. So the Drake Passage is, 23-day journey that you had. I think for obvious reasons why it might be dangerous, but why is it the most dangerous in the world? Like what makes that more dangerous than any other typical body of water? Like what typically happens there?
Yeah, so it's considered the most dangerous water in the world because it's where the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans meet, and just the way the currents come together, it makes it super choppy. Over 20,000 people have died trying to cross that channel. 800 boats have sunk. So it's no joke. And you really have to know the right weather forecast, the right window opportunity of when you go across. And for me, we were in a 15-meter sailboat, which is really small. And, you feel every freaking bump. So it took us 5 days to cross, and we had a captain and a co-captain. They did 2-hour shifts, literally for 5 days, just on watch and controlling the boat. And we didn't leave our bunks. There were 7 of us in total. Everybody was throwing up. It was like, honestly, probably way harder than the actual Ironman race, which took me 32 hours, was the 5 days just to get there. Yeah. So it's no joke. And, definitely you need the right crew, but I had complete trust in the captain. He's done the trip several times. And I felt very safe in his hands.
Unbelievable. Is it too cold? The air is not like a plane, obviously plane like a little propeller plane, not strong enough to go through, or is it water the only way to get to the land?
No, you can fly in and out. But a big thing in all of this is budget as well. And, I wouldn't be able to afford flying in a team and do it all that way. And even the boat was quite costly. And, I had to take a lot of risks and take out a loan. And, something that as another part of this was like, I just believed so much in what I was doing. And I lived in 10 places in 18 months. I was working 3 jobs. Like I was doing anything and everything to see this mission through. And I think I've said it on another talk recently. It was like, people see this incredible, feat of doing the Ironmans on 7 continents, but what they don't see is like, I'm the marketer, the like partnerships, the logistics, finances, like trying to figure out everything. And it's like running your own business. So there was a lot of challenges. And yeah,
I was going to say that. That's going to say 2 things. Thank you for bringing that up. One is like the power of the human spirit and the mind is like, we still don't even know the potential, is my belief. Like you just proved it hand in hand over again. And I think to your point, everyone just sees you putting your hands go across the waistline, but they don't see the 6 months of hardcore training, and in your particular instance, a couple of years just to prepare. This has never been done before, so it's not any old triathlon, Ironman. Like it's never been done before, right? So to your point, a whole level of logistics, they're like a true pioneer kind of charting, this is what it looks like, and this is what happens. Now I'm betting you now in the next 10 years, there's going to be a flood of people trying to do this. And that's what I hope that we do, so that people can provide that positive inspiration, right? Because it can be done, and it's got to be done properly. Like, I'm not going to do it because that's not my goal and I'm not built for it. But there's other things that we can all take lessons from this. To your point, like sometimes when you get going, you kind of got to do it all. Be single-minded and focused on that belief and that outcome that you're looking for. Quickly, the last two pieces were like the biking. How was the bike? Like, and we'll then talk about the running, but how was the biking? Like swimming, I've ridden 224 kilometers before, so it's the most I've done on mostly flat land. So I'm a cyclist, so that's pretty hard. I would think most people probably think the swimming in the cold water is the hardest, but having been a long-term cyclist, that's also not for the faint of heart, because you can get pretty crazy cramp. I've seen people spasm straight out on the floor, and grown men in incredible shape just flip like fish and become totally incapacitated for days. So can you talk to me about those other two elements?
For sure. So, the swim was physical torture and the bike was mental torture. So I did 180K, a 200-meter loop 900 times. It took me 21 hours. So I was on a fat bike, which is thicker tire, kind of mountain bike looking bike, very different to my triathlon aero bar kind of bike.
Yeah, it's a different beast.
Just
no
because
aerodynamics on that.
No aerodynamics.
Nothing helping you.
No. And it was, I couldn't go very fast because of the terrain you're riding. It's like ash from the volcano, which is like sand. So imagine biking on sand. The initial idea, I had a 1 kilometer loop. I knew it was going to be a lot of loops, but after the first loop, like I was practically falling over, and there was this one section that was 100 meters long that was runoff from a glacier that kind of hardened. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have to bike back and forth, do a little pin turn and do that until I finish this, because that's the only possible rideable section. And so it took me 21 hours to bike 180 kilometers, and it went right through the night. It got all the conditions, it was snowing, it was raining. It was like just the most insane mental challenge that I've had to endure.
Just when you might think the water might have been the worst, not so much. We've got another pretty hardcore match on that. Now, in doing the Ironman, obviously there's the sport, right? Cycling, swimming, running, but then there's the distance aspect to it. So clearly you got the drag effect of a fat tire on horrible terrain is nothing like a skinny tire on road bike with some inclines up. It's not even the same, but yet you still did the same kilometer distance.
Yeah, the same kilometer distance. So, my Ironman time for reference, in whatever my last Ironman was in Brazil, and that took me just over 11 hours, 16 minutes. This one in Antarctica took me 32 hours and 42 minutes nonstop, which I think is just it's hard to comprehend that. That's so long, and to be out there on your own for that long is I don't know, you go to places that you've never been to. It was dark places, there was places of euphoria, there was places of reflection, but the thing I kept coming back to was all the people that I got to talk to and learn from and grow from on the course of the 4-year journey. That was getting me through those hard moments.
Yeah, my mind is blown because having been a cyclist, I know how hard it is. And to your point, even myself, when I did the 224 kilometer or 160 mile race, there were times where my legs were going to give out, and because I've never done anything longer than about 40 miles. So my first time going for that crazy long run, but what got me through is what you just talked about, was seeing the pictures of people that have passed from cancer on the backs of people. I was riding for cancer, that's what got me through. And I saw a guy, to your point, I don't know, I never got a chance to speak to him because he's clearly focused, but he was sitting down, his legs didn't work. So obviously had some leg area, and he was biking with his arms. Yeah. The whole way from Toronto to Niagara Falls, through the hills. It was I just what am I complaining about? And it was rainy and cold, and you're gonna laugh. At one point, this was June, but it was 10 degrees, but it was raining. into
Yeah.
the wind, going about 30K on a downhill. So
Cold.
like, I was like, I didn't train for the cold. And I was like, almost thought about, let's just call the paddy wagon and drive, because I was with
Yeah.
a small group. But then I said, my motto is I don't quit.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you cannot quit. Like you said, in the water, like stopping now is not even an option. So I'll swim with no legs, you said, right? So that's
Yeah.
what I said. I will burn. Now I did tear up a little. I did injure my knee a little bit, pushing through that, but it kind of somewhat recovered and it's fine. But it's like, is it worth it? Yeah. Yeah, it's worth
Yeah.
it. Because it's like, I've not, it hasn't stopped me from doing anything. And I've got that ability where I use what you just said. It's kind of cool, but I'm like totally going away from the bike thing, let alone just the water. And then, what about the running? How did you, was that, I'm not going to say easier, but in comparison, or what kind of challenge did you go through that?
Yeah. So, at the running portion, like my leg was just like I felt like Terry Fox, honestly. Like my left leg was completely straight. I couldn't even, I was hobbling for the first portion of it because my knees were so stiff from biking for 21 hours. So it was just a battle, to be honest with you. It was like 100-meter run, 100-meter walk, like a walk run. And at that point, it was just like, it was kind of blissful too, because I've been going for so long and I knew it was going to take a long time, but I was able to enjoy it too. There was another racers nearby. It was like, obviously you want to do your best and get through it, but also I was like, I'm just going to kind of embrace this pain because I know I'm going to be able to come back to it for the rest of my life. And I really wanted to try and actively be present in the experience. And so I haven't shared yet, but my brother and my mom and my best friend came on this trip. And so my brother was running beside me for a little bit of it. And I actually started crying at one point because it was like so emotional for me, because it was a huge sacrifice to get there and to be able to kind of have that moment, shared with the people that are closest to you is like more than anything I could ever have asked for.
But you just can't buy that. Like that is not a purchasable thing. So kudos for you on that. Kudos for kind of going through all of that. It's like, I don't know, I know the story and talking to you a little bit more in depth. It's like, I feel moved myself. I trust the audience will as well. I just think that just when you think you can't get any harder, like it just, the whole thing is not easy. But what got you through is your brain, right? Like the thing that sits between your ears, that's that in your heart, right? And so now we're, a month past coming back. What's the body? Are you are you literally thought out now? How the knees doing? Like how are you feeling now that you've accomplished that?
Yeah, I think it's all the feels. You're excited and you're kind of riding a high of people sending you nice messages, and a lot of people have sent me messages saying that they signed up for their first race, whether it was a run or a triathlon, and that always gets me so excited because that's where this all started. Was a friend of mine did one, and it got me on this journey. And
one.
yeah, pretty crazy one, but I'm really excited. We're working on a documentary, and I joined like a speaker agency, and the idea is to like amplify this message. So I'm excited to come on this podcast, share the story, and go and talk to companies and conferences, and eventually show this film back at our high school. I said that during the pitch competition is, a dream come true would be to be back and share the story with the kids that I, grew up in that same hallway. And I think that the world needs more dreamers and doers now than ever. So the ability to live, be that and share it is what I'm kind of trying to embrace now.
Yeah, the whole I got like goosebumps just thinking about you and what you've done and the PMA aspect, the positive mental attitude, because I can, if anyone's gonna fault me for anything in life, it's for always being glass half full. And I know sometimes the glass is half empty, but I will always choose it to see it half full. And I've gone through a lot of different personal tragedies and challenges and stuff, but that's what gets us through. And anything and everything that we can do to amplify that message, it's critically important. The world has always been crazy, right? Like people say, oh, the world's crazy now, sure. But guess what? It always was crazy, right? You didn't know if there was a warring, tribe coming over the mountains and shocked the village. Like there was always been challenges. And I
Yeah.
think what's always been true, that good is always, it's, one, and positive mind and mindset and drive and determination has always won. Like, that's why we are where we are today. Because I don't know which Greek philosopher said it, but like, I don't stand tall because I stand tall, but on the shoulders of other greater men, and that would be men at that time. But now we have men and women involved in all sorts of aspects of the world. And I think that's great, because it's like, to your point, you're going to inspire a whole wave of people getting into a sport or chasing a dream. And your dream was chasing an Antarctica, which is going to be the name of the documentary. But I think there's just so much life lessons in it. If you think you can, you can't. You got people have to surround themselves with people like you, listen to you. Not everyone's going to be able to be in a room with you, but you've got, like you said, your speaking, your Instagram. Like, I'll put all the show links, all the items in the show links. But I think that is an incredible message. I think it's about the power of humanity, and thank you for unlocking that and showcasing it in a way that it's never been done before. It would be easy to back down, but guess what? I just absolutely love that you were surrounded by people that supported you. One example is Sarah Blakely. For her concept on the brand Spanx, she was
Yeah.
told over 100 times, no, this is a stupid business idea. And yet, when you listen to her, and I have 2 teenage daughters and my wife and stuff, and it's a problem that those pants have. I don't wear pants, but I don't like, it's like so obvious that it was a problem.
Yeah.
And I don't know how 100 people said no. And so the message there is, there will always be 100 people, but there will only ever be you.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, that belief is that you have to be your biggest cheerleader. And I don't know how many more books, how many more movies, how many more documentaries do we have to prove and show that the world needs more PMA? And I think it's that positive. This is why I love that I shared with the organization the lit candle. I don't know if it's the whole lit candle example, because you lose nothing by smiling. You lose nothing by saying good morning. That's when I go walk the dog, because God knows how long it takes me, because I just say, hey, good morning. And sometimes you have conversations with a stranger 50 houses down. How long you been living this area? 7 years. Oh, I just moved in or whatever. And it's kind of cool. So thank you for being an inspiration and a light to young men and women across the world. If you got a brain, you can do it, right? You can achieve incredible things. Even in Geo's movie Dreamer, even if you don't have any arms and legs, you can still fly a plane. There's people that doing stuff like that too. So it is possible, and drawing on that that is our wealth fountain of youth, or fountain of whatever energy you want to call it. So before we wrap, any parting words you'd like to leave us with? Because you've dripped all sorts of wisdom in this one.
No, I mean, like you said, 100 people will say no, but I think it only takes one person to say yes. And if anything, I just want to echo that, is like, if you're ever in a position to be somebody to say yes, do it, because you could change somebody's life and the whole trajectory. And if you can't find that person, then be that perfect person for yourself.
Yeah, I love